Hello there and welcome to the Slow 100. It is good to have you here at the end of a long day, with the lamp turned low and nothing much left that needs doing. Tonight, we're going to talk about shipwrecks. We'll go out onto the sea itself and look at why ships were lost so often within sight of the shore they were making for. We'll sail blind for a while, in the long centuries when nobody aboard could truly know where they were. We'll visit a handful of famous ships and hear what became of them. We'll go down and watch what the seafloor does to a wooden hull slowly over hundreds of years. We'll follow the divers who went down after them. And we'll end with the lights and the rules that were built afterwards. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let your breathing slow and lengthen on its own without your having to think about it. Let's begin out on the water, above the quiet floor of the sea. Most ships were not lost in the open ocean, but close to land. It is a strange thing to learn because the open sea looks like the dangerous part. In deep water, a ship has room. She can run before a storm for days and lose nothing but time and comfort. It is the edges that take ships, the shoals, the headlands, the harbour mouths, the last few miles of a long voyage. There the water is shallow, the currents are complicated, and there is stone waiting somewhere under the surface. A vessel that had crossed an ocean without trouble could be lost within sight of the church tower she was steering for. Sailors knew this, and the old accounts are full of it. They called deep water the safe water, and they were not being poetic about it. They were describing something they had watched happen. And so the real danger of the sea was never the middle of it, but the rim, where the land begins again. A lee shore was the thing sailors feared most. The phrase simply means land lying downwind of you, with the wind pushing you steadily toward it. For a sailing ship, this was the worst arrangement of sea and weather there was. A ship under sail cannot go directly into the wind. She can only work across it, tacking, gaining a little ground with each turn. If the wind is strong enough and the shore close enough, the arithmetic runs out. Every hour spent clawing to windward is an hour of being pushed back again. Captains would set every sail the masts could carry and hold on and hope the wind shifted a point or two. Sometimes it did. In the old marine paintings, you can often tell a lee shore at a glance. The breakers white along the beach, the ship heeled far over, her bow turned as hard away from the land as she can manage. It is a picture of patience held under pressure, hour after hour. Fog has taken more ships than storms have. Storms are loud, and they announce themselves. The barometer falls, the swell changes, the sky goes the colour of slate, and a crew has time to shorten sail and make ready. Fog does none of that. It arrives quietly, often in fine weather, and it takes away the instrument that mattered most of the time, which was the lookout's own eye. In fog, a ship could be half a mile from a cliff and know nothing at all about it. Crews would slow right down, ring bells, fire a gun, and listen for the echo coming back off unseen rock. Some masters judged their distance from land by the sound of surf or by the calling of birds. It was careful, attentive work, done at walking pace, with everyone aboard straining to hear. And so the most dangerous weather at sea was not always the wildest. Sometimes it was the softest, a still grey morning, with the water flat and the world gone white. A reef can lie hidden a few feet beneath calm water. This is what made coral and rock so difficult for sailing ships. A storm shows you where it is. A reef shows you nothing at all unless the swell happens to be breaking over it. On a calm day, a coral head sitting 3 or 4 feet down can look like little more than a slight change in the color of the sea. Ships drawing 20 feet passed over such places by luck as often as by skill. In the tropics, where the water is clear, a man was often sent up to the masthead at midday when the sun is high and the shadows are short, because from up there he could see the shapes of the bottom through the water as though through glass. That was navigation of a kind, a person high in the rigging, one arm around a mast, reading colour. Below him the ship moved slowly on, and the reef passed by unmet. Sandbars move, and charts go out of date. A river mouth or a shallow coast is not a fixed thing. It is sand in slow motion, pushed about by tide and current and by whatever the last winter's storms happen to do. A bar surveyed carefully one spring might sit several hundred yards away by the following one, or have grown, or split quietly in two. Chart makers did their best, and their best was honest, but paper cannot keep up with sand. This is why local pilots existed and why they were worth what they were paid. A pilot did not know the coast from a chart. He knew it from having gone in and out of it for 30 years, in every state of tide, and from talking with other men who did the same. He carried the newest information there was, and he carried it in his head. The chart showed you last year's coast. The pilot standing beside the helm knew this year's. The most dangerous moment of a voyage was often the last hour of it. By then, everything is working against caution. The crew are tired from weeks at sea, and they can see the place they have been thinking about for months. The water is shallowing. The channel is narrow. There may be other vessels coming out on the tide, and there is a quiet pressure to arrive, to make the harbour before dark rather than stand off and wait for morning. A great many old wrecks lie within a few miles of the port they were bound for, with their cargo still stowed and their voyage very nearly complete. Insurers came to know this pattern well, and so did the men who built the first harbour lights. The hardest part of a long journey was not the middle of the ocean. It was the last turn at dusk, with the lamps of the town already visible and everyone aboard thinking about being home. Tides could strand a ship that had done nothing wrong. In many places, the sea rises and falls by 10 or 15 feet twice a day, and in a few places by a great deal more than that. A vessel anchored perfectly well at high water could find herself sitting on mud 6 hours later, leaning over on her side waiting. Usually this was only inconvenient. A wooden hull is strong, and a flat bottom will take the weight for a while. But if the ground beneath her was rock or uneven, the ship's own weight could work against her, and the returning tide could do the rest. Crews learned to read tide tables the way farmers read weather. They knew that the sea keeps a schedule and that the schedule does not negotiate. And so a great deal of seamanship was simply waiting, sitting at anchor in fine weather, doing nothing at all, while the water came back to lift the ship gently off the sand. A following sea can be more dangerous than a head sea. It seems as though waves coming from behind ought to help, and up to a point they do. But a large wave overtaking a ship lifts her stern first, and while the stern is lifted, the rudder loses much of its grip on the water. For a few seconds, the helmsman is steering something that is not entirely there. If the ship slews sideways across the face of the wave, she can be laid far over. Sailors called this broaching, and they worked hard to avoid it. Ships running before a heavy sea would sometimes trail ropes or spars astern to slow themselves and keep the stern steady. The best helmsmen were valued for exactly this. The small early corrections made before the ship had really begun to wander. It was quiet, unglamorous skill, one hand on the wheel, eyes on the water behind, hour after hour through the night. Ice has always been the quietest hazard. It does not roar the way a storm does, and in fair weather, it can be almost beautiful, a white shape on the horizon in a flat, calm sea. The difficulty is that most of an iceberg is not visible. The greater part of it sits below the waterline, and it does not always sit directly beneath the part you can see. A berg can carry a shelf of ice out sideways, well under the surface, so that a ship keeping what looks like a generous distance is not keeping any distance at all. Smaller pieces are harder again, because they are difficult to see and still hard enough to hurt a hull. Crews in northern waters listened for ice as much as they looked for it, for the sound of the sea breaking against something out in the dark. And all the while the ice itself simply drifted south, slowly melting, going about its own long business. Some ships were simply never heard from again. They cleared a harbour on a given morning with a cargo and a crew and a date they were expected, and then the record stops. No wreckage came ashore. No other vessel reported seeing them. For weeks the owners would wait, and then for months, and eventually the name was written into a ledger under a heading that meant nothing more would be learned. In the age of sail, this happened often enough to be ordinary. There was no radio, no signal, no way at all to ask. A ship crossing an ocean was out of the world entirely until she came back into it. A few of those vessels have since been found, by accident, by fishermen or by survey ships mapping the bottom. Most have not. They are still out there somewhere, holding their own quiet answer, resting exactly where they came to rest, on the quiet floor of the sea. For centuries, no ship could reliably know its longitude. Latitude, which is how far north or south you are, could be measured from the sun or the stars with a simple instrument and a little arithmetic. Longitude is a different problem altogether. To know how far east or west you have travelled, you need to know the time at some fixed place and compare it with the time where you are. Clocks of the period could not keep that time at sea. They were pendulum clocks, and a pendulum needs a floor that does not move, so ships sailed with half their position known and half of it estimated. The answer, when it finally came, was a sea clock built by a carpenter's son who spent decades on the problem, and a set of lunar tables for those who could not afford one. But for a very long time before that, every master crossing an ocean carried a good guess and a great deal of care. Latitude was easy and east and west were guesswork. Because of that imbalance, sailors developed a habit that looks odd on a modern chart. Rather than steer straight for a destination, they would sail north or south until they reached the latitude of the place they wanted, and then turn and run along that line until they arrived. It was longer. It could add many days to a passage, and nobody aboard minded much. It was also far more likely to work. The technique shaped the routes of trade for hundreds of years, and it meant ships gathered along certain lines of the ocean, like traffic along a road. That is one reason some islands were found again and again, while others stayed unvisited for centuries. There is something restful in the logic of it, and it is worth borrowing now and then. Find the one thing you can be sure of, hold on to it, and let it carry you the rest of the way. Dead reckoning meant estimating your speed and then trusting that estimate for weeks. The method itself is old and sensible. You know the direction you have steered from the compass. You know roughly how fast you have gone from measurement. You know how long you have been going from the sand glass. Put those together, hour after hour, and you can say where you probably are. Every watch the figures were written on a slate, and every day they were gathered up and worked into a position, and that position was marked on the chart with a small penciled cross. The cross was an argument rather than a fact. Currents pushed the ship sideways without announcing themselves. Leeway slid her quietly off her track. Good navigators knew their own habits of error and allowed for them. So a ship's place in the ocean was, for most of history, a careful opinion, corrected whenever the sky allowed a fresh sight of the sun. A ship's speed was measured with a knotted rope and a sand glass. The instrument was called the log, and it was about as simple as an instrument can be. A flat piece of wood, weighted along one edge so that it floated upright, was thrown over the stern. It stayed more or less where it was in the water. The line attached to it ran out over the rail as the ship moved away, and that line had knots tied in it at even intervals. One sailor turned a small sand glass while another counted the knots slipping through his fingers until the sand ran out. The number of knots was the ship's speed, and that is where the word comes from, still. It was done every hour, in every weather, by tired men on a wet deck. A whole ocean crossing was built out of that small repeated ceremony. A chip of wood, a length of line and sand falling through glass. Compasses were thrown off by the iron in the ship herself. A magnetic compass wants to point at the magnetic pole, which is already some way from the true one, and that difference had to be corrected for on every chart. But there was a second and much closer problem. Guns, anchors, chain, fastenings and tools all carry a faint magnetism of their own, and they sit only a few feet from the needle. As iron came to be used for more and more of a ship, the effect grew until it could not be ignored. The answer, worked out in the 1800s, was to place correcting magnets and two soft iron spheres beside the binnacle, tuned for each individual vessel. It is a lovely idea, the ship's own error measured and then balanced out by hand. Ever afterwards, the compass sat in its wooden housing, lamplit through the night, quietly pointing the way it was meant to point. Charts were often copied from older charts, mistakes and all. Surveying a coastline properly is slow and expensive work, done in small boats with lead lines and angles over seasons. Reprinting an existing chart is quick. It cost almost nothing, and it sold just as well. So publishers copied, and the copies were copied again. And a coastline drawn slightly wrong in 1 century could still be slightly wrong 300 years later. Sometimes the error was small. A headland a mile out of place, a bay drawn a little too deep. Sometimes it mattered a great deal. Masters knew this and treated charts as advice rather than truth, annotating their own copies in ink with what they had actually found. Those marked up private charts became valuable objects, passed between friends and left carefully in wills. The printed sheet told you what was believed. The margins, in a small, careful hand, told you what somebody had seen with his own eyes on a grey afternoon years before. Whole islands appeared on charts that did not exist. They have a name, these places. They are called Phantom Islands. A captain would report land at a certain position in poor visibility or after a long passage, and the report would be believed and drawn in. Some were probably fog banks or low clouds sitting on the horizon, or ice. Some were real islands recorded at the wrong longitude, which is an easy mistake to make when longitude itself is uncertain. Once printed, they were remarkably hard to remove. Later, navigators who sailed over the spot and found only water were often assumed to have missed it somehow. Some phantom islands stayed on official charts for a century or more, quietly waiting to be disbelieved. They were struck off one by one as surveys grew more careful, and so there is a small ghost fleet of places in the history of the sea, named, drawn, searched for, and then gently let go. A single error in reckoning could compound for 1,000 miles. This is the quiet arithmetic behind a great many losses. If a ship is steering half a degree off what her navigator believes, nothing seems wrong at all. After a day, it is a few miles. After 3 weeks of open ocean, it is a great deal more than that, and the error grows steadily in one direction, never correcting itself. The same is true of a current that sets a ship sideways at half a knot, day and night, entirely unnoticed. Landfall was therefore the moment of truth, when calculation met coast. Careful masters built in a margin aiming deliberately to one side of their destination so that when land appeared, they at least knew which way to turn along it. It was humility written into a course. You accept that you are probably wrong, and you arrange to be wrong in a direction that does you no harm. The lead line was the oldest instrument aboard and one of the very best. It is nothing but a lead weight on a marked rope, and it had been in use since long before anyone thought to draw a chart. A sailor stood at the ship's side, swung the lead ahead of him, let it touch bottom, and read the depth from the markings as the line came upright. The markings were pieces of leather, cloth, and cord, so that they could be told apart by feel in the dark. There was more to it than depth. The base of the lead was hollowed and filled with tallow, and whatever the seabed was made of stuck to it. Fine sand, black mud, broken shell, small stones. A good pilot could name a place from that alone. Depth and the feel of the ground, called out steadily across a dark deck, kept more ships safe than almost anything else ever did. Sailors read the color of the water for warnings. Deep ocean is a particular dark blue, and it stays that color for weeks on end. As the bottom rises, the water changes to a lighter blue, then to green, then in shallow places to a pale milky shade where sand is stirred up beneath. Over coral it can turn almost turquoise. None of this is precise, but it is immediate, and it arrives before any instrument can tell you anything. Alongside color came the other signs: weed drifting past, the smell of land which sailors said could be caught many miles offshore, birds that roost ashore at night, flying in one consistent direction toward evening. A crew far from any certainty would gather all of it up and make a judgment, and the sea, for its part, kept offering these small honest signals up from the shallows and the reefs and the sandbanks, up from the quiet floor of the sea. The Mary Rose sank in sight of her own king. She was a warship of the English fleet, more than 30 years old by then and recently rebuilt, and on a July day in 1545 she was leading ships out of Portsmouth to meet a French force gathering in the Solent. The king was watching from the shore at Southsea Castle with a clear view of the water and of the whole fleet below him. What happened next took only minutes. She heeled over, took in water, and went down in the channel between the mainland and the Isle of Wight. Most of those aboard were lost, and the loss was felt sharply and remembered for a long time afterwards. But her story does not end in 1545, which is the unusual thing about this particular ship. She settled into soft silt on her starboard side, and the sea and the mud began, very slowly, to keep her rather than take her apart. She went down in calm weather, and not because an enemy had beaten her. The day was fine and the wind was light, so light that the fleet had trouble getting out of the harbour at all. She had not been holed by gunfire. There was no storm anywhere near her. Whatever happened aboard her own decks in a few moments as she came round. The exact cause is still argued over, and honest historians say so plainly. It may have been that she was overloaded with more guns and more men aboard than her rebuilt hull was comfortable carrying. It may have been a sudden gust catching her as she turned. It may have been a matter of orders misheard in the noise of a fleet action. Most likely it was several of those things together, as such things usually are. Centuries later, the argument continues gently among people who have spent their working lives with her timbers. Her gun ports were open and they sat low to the water. This is the detail that most explanations return to. Heavy guns are best carried low in a ship, because weight down low keeps her steady. And by the middle of the 1500s, shipwrights had learned to cut ports through the hull on the lower deck to let those guns fire. It was a real advance. It also meant that a row of openings existed only a few feet above the sea. In ordinary conditions, the ports were closed and sealed with a hinged lid. In action, they were open because a gun cannot be fired through a closed lid. If a ship carrying open ports leaned far enough over, water could reach them. Whether that is precisely what happened here cannot be proved now. But those open ports are there in the old accounts, and they are there in the ship herself, raised and studied and quietly explained. She lay in the mud of the Solent for more than 400 years. For a while after she sank, there were attempts to raise her, with cables and empty vessels at high tide, and none of them succeeded. Some of her upper timbers and rigging were taken off. Then the sea got on with things. Silt drifted into the wreck and filled it. Her exposed side was worn away over the following decades, but her buried side stayed where it was, packed in mud, holding its shape beneath the seabed. Fishermen sometimes snagged their nets on something down there. Nobody was quite sure what it was. In the 1830s, divers went down and brought up guns, and then interest faded again for well over a century. Meanwhile, ships passed above her constantly, in and out of one of the busiest naval harbours in the world, with no particular sense that anything remarkable was lying underneath them in the dark. The mud that buried her is the reason she survived. Wood in seawater does not usually last. It is eaten, slowly and thoroughly, by small marine creatures that make their living that way, and worked on by bacteria that need oxygen to do their work. Bury that same wood in fine, dense silt, and the oxygen is shut out. The creatures cannot reach it. The wood is simply left alone. The bacteria that remain work very slowly indeed. What is buried is therefore not merely hidden but preserved, held in a kind of chemical stillness. That is why so much of the Mary Rose came up as recognizable objects: bowls and combs and shoes, longbows, a fiddle, the tools of the ship's carpenter still fitted with their handles. The sea did not decide to keep her. Mud simply settled where mud always settles, quietly and without intention, and in doing so it kept a summer day almost exactly as it had been. She was raised again in 1982, and a great many people watched it happen. The work behind that morning had taken years. Divers had made tens of thousands of dives on the site, mapping and recording and clearing silt away by hand, and a steel frame had been built to support the hull as it came up. On the day itself, the lift was done slowly, in stages, with the ship cradled rather than pulled. Everything moved at about the pace of the tide. Television cameras carried it live, and people stopped what they were doing to watch a Tudor warship come up out of the Solent into daylight. Since then, she has been sprayed, treated, and dried over decades, which is its own kind of patience. She sits now in a building in Portsmouth, lit softly, her curved timbers still holding the shape of a ship. Visitors walk quietly past her, the way people do in front of something very old. The Vasa sank on her maiden voyage, barely a mile from where she had started. She was a Swedish warship, richly carved and painted, built for a king who wanted something magnificent. On an August day in 1628, she was worked out through Stockholm harbour, with crowds watching from the quays. A gust took her. She leaned, righted a little, and then leaned again further, and she was gone within minutes into 100 feet of water. The whole voyage had lasted less than an afternoon. A number of those aboard were lost, and the city knew it at once, because all of it happened in full view of the shore. An inquiry was held and witnesses were questioned closely. Nobody was punished, which tells you something about who had approved her design. And there she stayed, sitting upright in the harbour mud, with the ordinary traffic of a busy port going about its business directly above her, year after year after year. She was too tall and too narrow for her own ballast. The problem was one of proportion. She carried 2 full decks of guns high up in a tall hull, and beneath them a hold that simply was not deep or wide enough to take the stone ballast needed to balance all that weight. There is a story, well recorded at the time, that a stability test was made before she sailed. 30 men ran back and forth across her deck, and after 3 crossings she was rolling so much that the test was stopped. She sailed anyway. The king was waiting, and nobody wished to be the one to tell him otherwise. Shipbuilding then worked by experience and rule of thumb rather than calculation, and she was larger than anything her builders had attempted before. The result was a ship that looked superb at her moorings and could not stand up under sail. She was undone, in the end, by arithmetic that nobody yet knew how to do. She was raised, almost perfectly preserved, more than 3 centuries later. The Baltic Sea is the reason. Its water is brackish, only lightly salty, and the shipworm that destroys timber in most seas cannot live in it. So the Vasa sat in cold, dark, low-salt water with her hull essentially intact, waiting. She was located in the 1950s by a man who had spent years reading old records and probing the harbour bottom. Divers then tunneled beneath her to pass steel cables under the hull, working blind in the mud, and in 1961 she was lifted and brought back to the surface. She came up whole. Mud and water poured off her decks as she rose into the light. Her carvings were still there, hundreds of them, lions and emperors and strange faces, waterlogged and dark but present. She had been under the harbour for well over 300 years, and she looked, in her way, hardly changed at all. The Royal George sank at anchor in harbour on a summer morning. She was a large British warship of the 1700s lying at Spithead off Portsmouth in 1782 while repairs were made. To reach a fitting below the waterline, the crew had heeled her deliberately, running her guns over to one side so that she leaned. It was routine work in calm water, done there in the harbour rather than take her all the way into a dock. She leaned a little too far, water reached her lower ports, and she settled quickly, with many people aboard, including visitors and families. It was one of the heaviest losses the Navy had known. and it was remembered in poems and prints for generations afterwards. Her masts stood above the water for a time, marking the place where she lay. Later, she was broken up where she rested, and the site returned to what it had been: sand, tide, and the quiet floor of the sea. Wooden ships rarely sank quickly. More often they filled and settled and took their time about it. Wood floats, and a hull built of oak, has a great deal of buoyancy in the material itself, quite apart from the air held inside her. So, a wooden ship that has been holed does not simply drop away. She takes on water and sits lower, and the sea comes further up her sides, and each stage of that could last a long while. Crews pumped, and often a leaking ship was kept going for days by nothing but men taking turns at the handles. Many were saved that way, more than anyone thought to record. Others were kept afloat just long enough to be run deliberately onto a beach, which was a sensible thing to do, and often saved the cargo too. A ship going down under sail was usually not a sudden event, but a slow argument between water and timber. A ship usually breaks apart at the surface, not on the bottom. It is a point that surprises people who imagine a hull smashing when it lands. The seabed is often soft, and the water slows a descent, so the arrival can be quite gentle. Sometimes a hull comes to rest almost level. The violence, where there is any, happens above. A ship aground on rocks in a gale is being lifted and dropped by every wave, and a wooden hull worked like that will open along its seams within hours. A vessel that founders in deep water may break as she goes under, when part of her is still buoyant and part is already full and pulling down. What reaches the bottom is therefore often in pieces already, and the pieces settle separately, spread out along the line of drift. Then everything stops moving, and sand begins to gather in the corners, and nothing much happens for a very long time. Trapped air can hold a hull up for hours. Every enclosed space in a ship is a pocket, a cabin with a closed door, a hold with a battened hatch, the space beneath an overturned boat. Water pushing in has to force that air out, and it can only do so where there is an opening for it. So a vessel could turn over and float upside down, held there by the air caught under her decks, sometimes for a day or more. Sailing ships found floating like this were called derelicts, and they were a real hazard to other traffic, drifting half-submerged with no lights and no way of announcing themselves. Some were found by other ships, towed in and salvaged. Others drifted for weeks before the air finally worked its way out through a seam. It is a strange picture, and a quiet one, a ship with nobody aboard, riding low on an empty sea, going wherever the current chose. Cargo often decides how a ship goes down. The hull is only part of the story. What is stowed inside her governs how heavy she is, how she balances, and what happens once water begins to come in. A hold full of empty barrels adds buoyancy. A hold full of iron adds nothing but weight, and a ship carrying it can go down very fast once she is opened to the sea. Wool and cotton swell when wet, which could burst a deck or lift a hatch. Salt and sugar simply dissolve, so a ship could grow lighter as she flooded, in a way that nobody had planned for. Quicklime could heat when soaked. There were rules of thumb for all of it. Merchants and masters argued about stowage constantly, and the arguments were not petty ones. And so the character of a wreck was often set long before anything went wrong, down in the hold by the men deciding what went where. A ship carrying stone sinks very differently from one carrying timber. Consider two vessels of the same size in the same weather on the same coast. One is loaded with marble or millstones or cut blocks for a cathedral. The other is loaded with pine from the northern forests. Both are perfectly ordinary cargoes for the period. The stone ship, once flooded, has no buoyancy left anywhere in her. She goes down and stays down, and centuries later she is found as a neat mound of cargo with the shape of a hull around it, which is how a good many ancient wrecks are recognized at all. The timber ship behaves in almost the opposite way. Her cargo wants to float, and often does, so that the sea for miles around is scattered with drifting wood, while what remains of the vessel settles slowly. The same sea, the same night, two entirely different endings decided by what was stowed below. Ships loaded with grain could capsize when the cargo shifted. Grain is not really a solid cargo at all. Poured loose into a hold, it behaves a little like a slow liquid, and it keeps settling for days after loading. A hold filled level to the beams on sailing day might be several inches short of them a week later. That small gap is all the room the grain needs. When the ship rolled, the whole surface slid to the low side and stayed there, and the next roll only carried her further over. Masters knew this, and they fought it with shifting boards, stout wooden partitions run fore and aft down the middle of the hold. They topped the loose grain with sacks stacked tight against the deck above, so that nothing had space to travel. It was careful, unglamorous work, done by lantern light in a dusty hold, and it kept a great many ships upright on the long passage home. The heaviest part of a ship arrives on the bottom first. A wooden vessel does not sink as one tidy object. She comes apart on the way down, and the densest things in her lead the way. Ballast stone iron pigs, the guns, the anchors, and their cable. These fall almost straight, while the light upperworks drift and hang and follow slowly after. This is why archaeologists so often find the ballast mound before they find anything else at all. It is a long, low pile of rounded stones lying in the shape of the hull that once held them, sometimes still showing the narrowing at bow and stern. Nothing else in the wreck holds its original arrangement so faithfully as that stone does. Around it, spread wide by the current, lie the lighter pieces, planking, barrel staves, the broken remains of a deck. The stone stays where it landed for centuries. It is the ship's own spine drawn out in cobbles on the seabed, waiting to be read. A wreck comes to rest facing whichever way the current took it. On the surface, a ship has a heading held by her rudder and her sails and the hands of the man at the wheel. The moment she leaves the surface, that ends. A hull sinking through deep water is a slow, clumsy thing, pushed by the drag of masts and rigging and turned by whatever the tide happens to be doing. She may swing through a quarter circle on the way down or turn most of the way around. Divers who reach an old wreck sometimes find her lying square across the channel she was following, or pointing calmly back toward the harbour she had left that morning. It tells you nothing about her last course, and everything about the water above her. The sea sets a ship down the way it would set down a leaf, and then leaves her there, settled and still, facing whatever direction the current happened to choose. Debris from a wreck can drift for years. Wood does not sink simply because a ship has. Deck planking, hatch covers, spars, sealed casks and cork floats all swim, and they take a long time to grow heavy enough to give up. Some of it comes ashore within days on the nearest beach, and the beachcombers of Cornwall and the Dutch islands knew the timber of a wreck by sight. The rest goes travelling. Caught in the North Atlantic currents, a waterlogged hull could stay just awash for months, and shipping notices of the 1800s carried warnings about the same derelict sighted again and again by different vessels hundreds of miles apart. Chart offices marked such hazards with a small cross, moved as reports arrived. Slowly the seams open and the fastenings loosen, and the whole thing softens into pieces. What began as a ship becomes a long, thin trail of wood on the water, spreading and thinning, drifting wherever the ocean happens to be going. Some ships sank so gently that the crew stepped into the boats dry. It is easy to imagine every loss as a violent one, but a great many were not. A wooden hull that had opened a seam on a sandbank in fine weather might take half a day to fill. The pumps would be worked in shifts, the water would gain by inches, and long before it mattered, there was time to lower the boats properly, to load the ship's papers and the chronometer, and to pull away in good order. Accounts of these losses are strangely calm. Men speak of rowing off a little way and resting on their oars to watch in no hurry at all, while the masts settled lower and the sea closed over the deck almost without a sound. Then there was only open water and a boat and a long, slow row toward land, while the ship went down to the quiet floor of the sea. The raft of the Medusa was built from the wreck of the ship herself. The French frigate Medusa went aground on a shoal off the coast of West Africa in 1816 in shallow water, a long way from any help. There were not enough boats for everyone aboard, so the ship's carpenters were set to work building. They took the topmasts and the yards, the heavy spars that had carried her sails, and lashed them into a frame with rope from her own rigging. Over the frame they laid loose planking, torn from her decks and her bulwarks. The result was long and low and roughly rectangular, perhaps 60 feet by 20, with no rail worth the name, no proper mast, and no rudder. It was the ship remade as the simplest thing that would float. The frigate herself broke up on the shoal not long after, and what she left behind was a raft made out of her own good timber. The painting that made it famous was based on the testimony of survivors. Two of the men who came back from that raft, a young ship's surgeon and an engineer, wrote an account of the voyage and published it in Paris. It was widely read, and it started an enormous public argument about who had been responsible. A painter in his late 20s, Theodore Géricault, read the book and went looking for its authors. He met them, questioned them for hours, and had them describe the raft down to the arrangement of its planks. He wanted the picture to be a record rather than an invention. What he produced was a canvas over 20 feet across, dark and green and full of weather, and when it was shown at the Paris Salon, it was argued about for months. It hangs in the Louvre still, and people stand in front of it quietly, the way they might stand at a window. The artist built a model raft in his studio to work from. Géricault took a large room on the edge of Paris and more or less moved into it. He had a carpenter make a scale model of the raft, exactly as the survivors had described it, and set small wax figures on it so that he could study how the light fell and how the whole arrangement sat on the water. He made drawing after drawing, dozens of separate studies, before he touched the final canvas. He is said to have cut his own hair short so that he would not be tempted out into company, and he worked at the picture for the better part of a year. Visitors described the studio as almost silent, the huge canvas leaning against one wall, the little model on a table beside it. Out of that patient, orderly room came one of the most famous pictures of the sea ever painted. The Franklin expedition sailed with 3 years of tinned food. When the two ships left England in 1845 to look for a passage through the Arctic, they carried supplies on a scale nobody had attempted before. Alongside the usual salt beef and biscuit and flour, there were thousands of sealed tins of soup, of meat, of vegetables. Tinned food was still a young idea then, barely a generation old, and the tins were heavy things of iron plate, sealed by hand with solder, and opened with a hammer and a chisel. Some held enough soup for a whole mess of men at once. The expedition also carried a library of more than 1,000 volumes, a hand organ that played tunes from a pinned barrel, and slates and lesson books, because the officers expected to spend at least 2 winters frozen in and wanted the crews occupied. They provisioned as if they were building a small town, to be carried north and set down on the ice. Both of Franklin's ships were fitted with steam engines and heated decks. Erebus and Terror had begun life as bomb vessels, built heavy to absorb the recoil of enormous mortars, which made them unusually strong ships to send into ice. Before sailing, they were rebuilt. Each was given a small steam locomotive engine, bought second-hand from a railway, driving a screw propeller that could be hoisted clear of the water when the ice closed in. The engines were slow and thirsty, meant only for pushing through a lead in the pack when the wind failed. Their bows were plated with iron and doubled with oak. Pipes carried hot water from the galley boilers along the lower deck so that the men would have some warmth through the dark months. There were stills to make fresh water and stoves and lamps. For the middle of the 1800s, they were about as well equipped as ships could be. 2 small, warm, wooden worlds, prepared with enormous care for the cold. They were last seen by whalers in Baffin Bay, waiting for the ice. In the summer of 1845, some weeks out from England, the two ships were met by whaling vessels working the northern fishery. The crews spoke to one another in the ordinary way of ships meeting far from home, and letters were handed across to be carried back to England. Those letters, cheerful and quite ordinary, reached families at home later that same autumn. Erebus and Terror were moored to an iceberg, holding their station, waiting for the pack in the strait ahead to open enough to let them through. That was the last that anyone outside the expedition saw of them. It makes a very quiet ending to the visible part of the story. Two well-found ships tied up to a floating mountain of ice, in good order, in good spirits, waiting for a door in the north to open. The whalers sailed away south, and the strait closed behind them. Search parties looked for them for over a decade. When no word came home, the Admiralty offered rewards, and Franklin's wife pressed and funded and wrote letters until half the Navy seemed to be looking. Ships went in from the east and from the west, and one party came overland across the top of the continent. Some left food and messages in cairns on lonely headlands. Between them, over more than 10 years, they searched thousands of miles of channels and islands, and in the doing of it, they charted a great deal of the Arctic that no one had ever mapped. In the end, a sledge party found a single sheet of paper in a stone cairn, with a few lines added in the margin recording that the ships had been abandoned in the ice and that the expedition was lost. It is a small piece of paper. For a long time, it was very nearly everything anyone had, and the ships themselves stayed missing. The ships were found at last, within the past 20 years. For a century and a half, they were the great absence of Arctic history, hunted by expedition after expedition and never seen. Then modern surveys began working the shallow waters of the central Arctic in a methodical way, season by season, towing sonar in narrow lines across the seabed and coming back each summer to the ground they had not yet covered. One ship turned up first, lying in water so shallow that a diver can be down on her deck in a few strokes. The second was found 2 years afterwards, further north, in a sheltered bay. Sonar drew them first as faint outlines on a screen, a hull shape where the seabed should have been flat. Both of them are almost whole. After all the sledges and the searching, after all the long, cold marches over the ice, they were found from above, by patient boats moving slowly back and forth, reading the shadows on the bottom. They were found close to where Inuit accounts had always said. Through the long search years, Inuit families in the region told visiting parties what they knew, that ships had been in the ice, that one had gone down in a certain stretch of water, that things from them had been seen and carried away. Those accounts were passed down and repeated for generations. They were not maps, and they did not name a precise spot, but they pointed steadily at one part of the coast. For a long while, the testimony was set aside in favor of theories worked out in London. The modern search took it seriously instead and worked the waters the accounts described. Local hunters and elders travelled with the survey boats and helped to guide them. Both wrecks were found in that country. It is a good reminder that the best knowledge of a coast often belongs to the people who have always lived on it and is kept in memory rather than on paper. The cold has kept them almost intact. In Arctic water, the usual destroyers of a wooden ship barely function at all. The creatures that bore into timber cannot live there. Bacteria work slowly, and the sea is dark and still for most of the year. So the ships have simply waited. Divers report decks that are recognizably decks, with the planking in place, and cabins with their fittings standing and glass unbroken in the skylights. Plates sit in their racks. Bottles stand upright in a locker. A pair of boots waits under a bunk, laced as they were left. In the silt on the floor of one cabin there are drawers that have not been opened since the 1840s. The work goes very slowly now, a few weeks in each short summer, and the divers are careful with what they touch. After all that searching, the ships turn out to have been keeping themselves rather well on the quiet floor of the sea. Below a certain depth, there is no light at all. Sunlight entering the sea is stripped of its colors one at a time. Red disappears first, within the first 30 feet or so, then orange, then yellow, until everything around you is a soft blue-green. By 600 feet only the faintest blue remains, enough to tell up from down and very little more. Below about 3,000 feet, there is nothing whatever. No dusk, no glow, only a darkness that does not change between midday and midnight. Sunlight has simply run out, and the water keeps the same temperature and the same blackness year after year. A wreck lying down there has never been seen whole by anyone. Lights lowered from above reach a few yards and pick out a rail, a bollard, a run of planking, and then the dark closes in again behind them. Most of the ships in the ocean are held in a black that has never once been interrupted. Cold, dark water is the best preservative there is. Almost everything that destroys an object needs warmth, or light, or oxygen, or all three together. Cold slows the chemistry down. Darkness takes away the sunlight that would otherwise break down cloth and rope and paint. Deep water sits close to freezing whatever the season above it, and it hardly varies from one century to the next. So a boot, or a leather book cover, or a coil of rope that would have crumbled in a warm attic within a decade can lie on the seabed and come up soft and complete. Ropes come up still laid in their coils, and cloth still holds the weave the loom gave it. Museums that raise such things must keep them wet from the moment they leave the water, because it is the drying, not the soaking, that destroys them. The sea is not really eating these ships. In the cold and the dark, it is holding them, carefully as they were. Wood is eaten by a small mollusk called the shipworm. It looks like a pale worm, and it is not one. It is a clam, with its body stretched long and two small ridged shells at the head end that it uses as a drill, turning slowly, grinding a tunnel through solid timber. It enters as a larva through a hole no wider than a pin, and spends the rest of its life inside, growing as it bores. By the time the damage shows on the surface, the inside is already gone. A plank that looks perfectly sound can be honeycombed within. For centuries, this was the great enemy of every wooden ship. Hulls were charred, tarred, sheathed in lead, given a sacrificial outer skin of soft planking, and at last, in the 1700s, covered below the waterline in sheets of copper. Whole navies were resheathed because of an animal no longer than a finger, and in warm salt water it is patiently taking the ships apart still. Where there is no oxygen in the mud, nothing eats the wood at all. Seabed mud is not the same all the way down. A few inches under the surface, in fine silt, the oxygen runs out, and below that line, the animals and bacteria that break timber apart cannot live. A hull that settles into such ground is sealed rather than buried. The timbers stay wet and cool and undisturbed, and the chemistry that would rot them simply stops. Everything under that line is held at a standstill, in the cold, in the dark, in the silt. This is why so many of the best preserved wrecks are the ones that sank into soft ground rather than onto rock. Half a ship can lie embedded and perfect, while the half above the mud line vanishes entirely, worn away by current and creatures over a few decades. Archaeologists sometimes describe it as a tide mark. Below it, the ship. Above it, a scatter of stone and iron in the silt. The Baltic preserves wooden ships better than almost anywhere. It is a strange sea, shallow and cold, and fed by a great many rivers, so that its water is only faintly salty. The shipworm, which needs proper salt to live, cannot survive in most of it. That single absence changes everything. Ships that went down in the Baltic 300 and 400 years ago are still standing on the bottom, with their hulls whole, their carved sterns in place, and in some cases their masts upright in the dark. Survey teams working the northern Baltic have found vessels so complete that the deck fittings can be counted from a photograph. Their timbers, brought up as small samples, can still smell faintly of tar. There are more intact old wooden ships in that one sea than in all the warm oceans of the world together. It is a cold, brown, quiet water, and it has turned out to be the gentlest keeper of ships we have. Iron wrecks grow strange orange formations called rusticles. They hang from railings and plating and the edges of decks, and they look a little like icicles made out of rust, which is where the name comes from. Some are as thin as a finger, some as thick as an arm, and they can grow several feet long. They are soft to the touch, and a passing hand can bring one down in a slow orange cloud. They are the visible sign of iron going slowly back into the sea. On a large iron or steel wreck, they cover almost everything within a few decades, softening every hard edge until the ship looks less built than grown. Photographs of deep iron wrecks show whole staircases and cranes draped in them, orange and brown and faintly furred. Given long enough, the rusticles take the metal with them. What is left behind is a shape in the sediment, holding the outline of a ship that has quietly turned into something else. Rusticles are alive in their way. They are not simple rust. Each one is a colony, a mixed community of bacteria and fungi living together inside a structure they have built for themselves out of iron compounds. Cut one open and it is not solid at all. There are channels running through it, carrying water in and waste out, and a porous interior where the different organisms work at different depths. They draw their energy from the iron, and in doing so, they slowly turn good steel plate into a fragile orange powder that collapses at a touch. It is a very slow kind of eating, measured in tons over a century. The hull gives up a little of itself each year, quietly, without ever once being disturbed. Biologists who study them describe something closer to a reef than a stain. On the great iron wrecks of the deep ocean, the ship is being taken apart by something that is, in its patient way, alive. Sand can bury a wreck completely within a single season. On a shallow, sandy coast, the seabed is not a fixed thing. Storms move enormous quantities of sand along the shore, and a hull sitting on the bottom is an obstruction that the current has to flow around. Where the flow slows on the sheltered side, sand drops out of it and piles up. The wreck makes its own bank in the way a fence post makes a drift of snow. A wreck that stood clear of the bottom one autumn can be a low mound by the following spring and gone entirely by the year after that. Divers who have worked the same site for years talk about it appearing and disappearing, sometimes an exposed rail and a stretch of deck, sometimes nothing but a slope of clean sand where they know a ship is. The sea covers over its own work. What was a wreck becomes, for a while, simply part of the shape of the coast. A buried wreck is a protected wreck. Sand is not only a hiding place, it is a lid. Underneath it, the water barely moves, oxygen is scarce, and the animals that would take a hull apart cannot reach the timber. Everything that would ordinarily wear a wreck away is shut out. Archaeologists have learned to be glad of a wreck that has gone missing under the sand, because the sand has been doing their work for them. That is why so much of what we know about early ships comes from the parts that happened to be buried, while the exposed upper works had long since gone. Even now, as you rest, sand is drifting grain by grain across hulls that nobody has ever found, settling into the gaps between planks, closing them in a little more. It is not really a loss. It is the sea putting something away carefully, in the dark, where the current cannot get at it, and leaving it there for whoever comes looking with enough patience. Some wrecks are only revealed when a storm moves the sand again. Whatever buries a ship can also uncover her. A single hard winter gale on a shallow coast can shift the seabed for miles and lift the sand off a hull that has been hidden for 100 years. Beaches give things up too. On the coasts of Wales and the Netherlands and the Carolinas, walkers after big storms have found black ribs of oak standing out of the sand at low tide, a whole shape of frames and planking that was not there the week before. Archaeologists hurry out to record them because the same sea will usually cover them again within a season or two. Photographs and notes may be all that remains of the visit. They are brief visits. The ship comes up into the daylight for a few tides, is looked at and drawn and photographed, and then goes quietly back under, part of the quiet floor of the sea again. People have been diving on wrecks for as long as ships have sunk. Salvage is one of the oldest trades on the water. In the ancient Mediterranean, divers who worked for sponge and for coral were hired to go down after lost cargo, and the recovery of goods from a wreck was common enough that the law had rules for it. One old code, remembered from the island of Rhodes, set the diver's share by the depth he had worked in, a small portion for shallow water, and half of everything he brought up if he had gone deep. That tells you two things. Wreck diving was ordinary work, and everybody understood that depth was the thing that cost you. The rule was old when it was written down, and it stayed in use for centuries afterwards. Long before any equipment existed at all, men were going down into cold green water with a rope and a weight and coming back up with something in their hands. Early divers simply held their breath. There was no other way for most of history, and it worked better than you might expect. A trained breath-hold diver could reach 40 or 50 feet and stay down long enough to sling a rope around an anchor or to lift a small chest. They went down holding a heavy stone to save the effort of swimming, dropped it on the bottom, and were hauled back up on a line by the men in the boat. A good day might be 40 or 50 descents, each one lasting a minute or a little more. It was cold, blind, repetitive work, done again and again through a long day. Sponge divers in the Aegean and pearl divers in the Gulf did this for their whole working lives. The tools were a rope, a stone, a knife, and a great deal of patience, and with them a surprising amount of the world's lost cargo was quietly brought back up. The diving bell is an old idea, and a simple one. Turn a bucket upside down and push it into water, and the air stays inside it. Make the bucket big enough for a man, and you have a diving bell. It was described in antiquity and used seriously from the 1500s onward, a heavy, open-bottomed chamber of wood or iron, weighted with lead and lowered on a chain. Inside, a diver stood on a bench with the water at his knees, breathing the trapped air, with a lamp and a view of a small circle of seabed. He could step out into the water, work for a minute, and come back to the bell for another breath. A man in the boat above watched the chain, and a signal on a rope brought him up. It was crude and cold and slow. It was also the first way anyone found of taking a room full of air down into the sea with them. Air was sent down to bells in weighted barrels. The trouble with a bell is that the air inside it goes stale, and after an hour or so, the men have to come up. In the late 1600s, an English astronomer, Edmund Halley, worked out a way around it. He had barrels lined with lead, filled with air and sealed, and lowered them on their own ropes to the bell below. A diver took a leather hose from the barrel, opened it, and the air, being lighter than water, rose up into the bell and pushed the stale air out through a tap in the roof. Nothing about it needed a pump or an engine. It worked on the simple willingness of air to rise. It was a beautifully simple piece of plumbing. With it, Halley kept a party of men working at 10 fathoms for well over an hour, and afterwards wrote about the whole arrangement with a quiet and evident satisfaction. The closed helmet and suit changed everything. Early helmets were open at the bottom like a small bell worn on the shoulders, which meant a diver had to stay upright. bend too far and the air ran out of it. In the 1830s, a German-born engineer working in London, Augustus Sieber, sealed the helmet to a watertight dress of rubbered canvas with air pumped down from the surface and a valve to let the used air escape. Now a diver could lie down, roll over, work under an overhang, and stay for hours. The pump was the whole system. As long as it turned, the diver had air. The new dress was tested on real wrecks in home waters, among them the Royal George at Spithead, and it worked. In something close to that form, with a copper helmet and lead boots and a hand pump turned steadily by men in a boat above, it stayed in use for well over a century. Divers worked in near darkness, feeling their way. On a wreck in coastal water, the visibility is often measured in inches. Silt lifts at the smallest movement, and a diver's own hands and feet stir up a cloud that takes many minutes to settle again. So the work was done by touch. Men learned a wreck the way you learn a dark room at night, by holding on to something known and moving out from it a little at a time. They counted frames, followed a rail, felt for the corner of a hatch. Some carried a knotted line as a guide back to the shot rope, paying it out behind them. Old salvage divers spoke of building the whole ship in their heads over weeks, until they could move about a hull they had never actually seen. Above them, the surface was a faint green suggestion, and around them there was nothing but cold water and the shape of the thing under their gloves. Salvaging cannon was often worth more than salvaging cargo. A ship's guns were the most valuable metal aboard, particularly the bronze ones, cast with care and often beautifully decorated. Bronze does not rust, and a gun that had lain on the seabed for decades could be raised, cleaned, and either used again or melted down at once for its metal. Iron guns were worth less, but they were still worth having. A single well-cast bronze gun could be worth more than a small merchant vessel. Because of this, wreck sites were worked for their guns long before anyone thought about anything else on them. Divers in Bells recovered dozens of bronze cannon from one famous Swedish warship more than 300 years ago, groping for them in the dark of the harbour bottom. The cargo might have rotted and the hull might be beyond saving, but the guns lay there, heavy and patient and perfectly good, waiting for anyone willing to go down. Some wrecks were salvaged within days of sinking. If a ship went down in shallow harbour water and her mast still stood above the surface, the salvors were often at work before the week was out. Local boats came out with grapnels and ropes and started on the rigging first, because cordage and canvas were expensive and easy to recover. Then the anchors, the guns, the fittings, anything of metal. Sails were dried on the beach and sold on. Even the copper sheathing was stripped off the bottom, where it could be reached. In busy anchorages, this was practically an industry, with men who did nothing else and knew every bank and channel by heart. A ship that had cost a fortune to build could be reduced to bare frames in a season, picked over by her neighbours. Very little was wasted in a world where good timber and good rope were hard to come by, and the sea had put them within reach. Explosives were used to open hulls and destroyed much in the process. Once gunpowder charges could be fired underwater, the quickest way into a sunken ship was simply to blow the deck off her. It worked. It also reduced a great deal of irreplaceable structure to splinters. The most famous case was the Royal George, whose remains lay in the middle of a busy naval anchorage and were considered a hazard to shipping. Over several seasons in the 1840s, an army officer named Paisley laid charges on her and took her apart piece by piece, raising guns and timber as he went. It was the first large-scale use of explosives on a wreck anywhere. It was thought of at the time as good engineering, and by the standards of the day, it was. Nobody was yet asking what the ship might have told us if she had been left alone. That question would not really be asked for another 100 years. Modern archaeology treats a wreck as a site, not a prize. The change came slowly, out of a realization that where a thing lies matters as much as the thing itself. A cannon lifted off the bottom without a record is only a cannon. A cannon planned, photographed and drawn exactly where it fell can tell you how the ship was armed, how she came apart, and which way she was lying. So the modern method is patient and unglamorous, grids laid out over the seabed, tags and measurements, seasons of survey before anything is touched, and very often a decision to raise nothing at all. Most wrecks are now recorded and then left exactly where they are, because the safest museum for a wooden ship is the water that has been keeping her. Divers come and go, and the ship stays. The work is quiet and slow, carried out a few feet at a time on the quiet floor of the sea. Most survivors were saved by other ships, not by their own boats. A ship's boat was never meant to cross an ocean. It was a way to stay afloat and stay together until something larger came along. The old sea lanes helped more than people realize. Sailing traffic gathered into narrow corridors of reliable wind and current, so a boat adrift in the western approaches or off the Cape was often sitting inside a road that other ships were using too. Crews knew this, and they worked to be seen. They set a man to watch the horizon in turns, rigged an oar upright with a shirt or a scrap of canvas bent to it, and kept a little powder or a tarred rag back for smoke if the weather allowed. Sometimes the wait was a few hours, sometimes it was days of slow rowing and watching, and then a topsail would lift above the edge of the world, small and white, and grow larger all afternoon. Ship's boats were rarely enough for everyone aboard, and nobody at the time thought that strange. A boat was not seen as a lifeboat. It was a working tool, the way a cart is a working tool on a farm. Boats ferried the crew ashore for water and firewood, carried out an anchor to warp the ship off a bank, and towed the bow around in a flat calm when the sails hung empty. A big merchant man might carry a longboat, a cutter, a jolly boat, and a small gig for the master, and every one of them took up deck space that could otherwise hold cargo, spare spars, or guns. So the boats were sized for errands, not for everyone. A vessel with 100 people aboard might carry 3 or 4 boats, and nobody thought it odd. They sat nested one inside another on the skid beams above the main hatch, upside down, painted white, filling slowly with rainwater and sun, waiting for an ordinary morning's work. Boats were often carried lashed down and hard to launch, which sounds like carelessness and was really just the sea. A boat sitting loose on deck in heavy weather is a danger to the ship. So it was chocked, wedged, and lashed hard to ring bolts, sometimes with a canvas cover stretched over it and sewn down at the edges. Getting one into the water was a piece of seamanship in itself. You rigged tackles from the yard arms or a stay, cast off the gripes, swung the boat out over a rolling side, and lowered it with people hauling in time on both falls. It took several hands, a little time, and a ship that was not rolling too far. In a heavy seaway, all three of those could be in short supply. There was another quiet problem too. A wooden boat kept dry on deck for months opens its seams and leaks steadily until the planks swell shut again, so a bailer was always stowed underneath the thwarts. Thirst was the danger, not hunger, and every sailor understood the difference. A body can go a surprisingly long way on very little food. Water is measured in days. That is why the first thing anyone did in a boat pulling away from a ship was to look for the breaker, the small cask kept ready with fresh water in it. If a cask had been stove in, or if salt had got into it, the whole shape of the voyage changed. So they rationed by measure rather than by thirst. A tin cup with a mark scratched in it, or a musket ball held in the mouth to keep it damp, or a strip of canvas rigged as an awning to keep the sun off the shoulders through the middle of the day. It was patient, unglamorous work, small sips, long shade, and the sound of water moving under the planks, close enough to touch and no use at all. Rain was the difference between living and not, and castaways learned to read the sky for it the way a farmer does. A dark shoulder of cloud on the horizon with a grey curtain hanging beneath it meant a squall, and a squall meant fresh water falling out of the sky for free. Everything in the boat became a catchment. A sail was unbent and spread between the thwarts to hold a shallow pool. Oilskins and hats were laid out. The first of it always ran salty, because the canvas had been soaked in spray for weeks, so they let that go and caught what came after. The water was then poured carefully into the empty breaker, funnel made from a rolled rag. A good squall could fill it in 20 minutes and set the boat up for another week. And afterwards there was that particular quiet a squall leaves behind. The sea dimpled all over, the air washed clean, and the smell of rain still sitting on the wood. Castaways learned to eat things they never imagined and did it without much comment. The boat itself became a small farm. Within a week or two, the planking below the waterline grew a beard of green weed and a crust of goose barnacles, and those were scraped off with a knife and shared out. Anything that could be chewed was chewed, and anything spare was dried and put away. Flying fish came aboard on their own at night, skittering off a wave crest and landing in the bottom of the boat, and the sound of one arriving was a genuinely good sound. Seabirds settled on the gunwale because they had never learned to be afraid of people. Sailors ate them and used the feathers to line a hat against the sun. None of it was pleasant, and none of it was dramatic. It was simply arithmetic, done slowly, day after day, while the boat lifted and fell, and the horizon stayed exactly where it was. Some survivors drifted for weeks and made land, and one of those voyages is still taught in navigation schools. When William Bligh and 18 men were put into the launch of the Bounty, they had a small open boat, a quadrant, a pocket watch, and no proper chart at all. They sailed nearly 4,000 miles across the Pacific to Timor in about 7 weeks. Bligh kept a log the entire way, ruling neat columns in the wet, taking the sun when he could, and steering by dead reckoning between islands he had only heard described. He rationed by weighing bread against a pistol ball on a pair of scales made from coconut shells. Everybody got the same, and the master got no more than anybody else. It was, in the end, an act of extremely ordinary seamanship carried out for a very long time. And when the land finally showed, it showed the way land always does, as a low blue thickening that refuses to move with the clouds. Rescue often came from fishermen, not navies, and that is worth sitting with for a moment. A warship is built to cross oceans. A fishing boat is built to work one particular stretch of coast, and the people in it know that stretch the way you know your own stairs in the dark. They knew where the bar shoaled, which channel stayed open on the ebb, and how a certain headland made a lee you could slip into when nothing else would serve. So when a ship struck on the sands, it was very often the local boats that went out. The deal luggers off the Goodwins, the pilot gigs of Cornwall, the open beach boats of the Dutch and Norwegian coasts. They were paid in salvage when there was salvage, and not paid at all when there was not. Mostly they went because they were the ones who could. Afterwards, the boats came back up the shingle, and the village went home to bed. The sea gives almost nothing back, but it does give some things back, and coastal people built whole habits around what returned. Anything that floated came ashore eventually. Casks, crates, hatch covers, ship's timbers with the tree nails still in them, a sea chest with somebody's name burned into the lid. On some coasts you can still find cottages and barns with a ship's deck beam holding up the roof, or a door made from a wide plank no local tree ever grew. A figurehead might end up in a garden or over an inn door, weathered down to bare wood. Best of all, sometimes, was the name board, because a name board told you which ship it had been, and that turned a rumour into a record. Whole parishes learned to walk the tide line after a gale, out of habit as much as hope. Then the tide would turn, and the beach would be smooth again by morning, with only the rack line to say anything had happened at all. Message bottles were sometimes the only record left, and they were taken seriously by everyone who found one. The method was simple: a page torn from a log or a pocketbook, a few lines in pencil because ink runs the position as best it could be reckoned, then the paper rolled and pushed into an empty bottle, and the cork driven home and sealed over with wax, pitch, or candle grease. Then it went over the side. Most were never seen again. That was understood from the start, and they wrote them anyway. A few came ashore months later on a beach hundreds of miles downwind, still readable, and settled a question that had been open for a long time. Later, oceanographers borrowed the same idea on purpose, seeding thousands of drift bottles to map how currents actually moved. And all the while the ship they had been written aboard was already settling into the dark, coming quietly to rest on the quiet floor of the sea. Lighthouses were built where ships kept being lost, which means the map of lights around a coast is really a map of old sorrow, read backwards. Nobody put a tower on a bare rock for the view. They put it there because the same reef, the same headland, the same shifting sand had taken ship after ship until the losses could not be ignored. The Eddystone, out in the channel off Plymouth, went through several towers before John Smeaton built one of dovetailed granite blocks, each stone keyed into its neighbours, so the whole thing behaved like a single rock. The Bell Rock off the east coast of Scotland covers at every high tide, so the builders worked in the hours the sea allowed them and slept in a wooden house on legs above the water. Slow, careful, patient work. It took years, and several summers were lost entirely to weather. And then one evening a light stands where nothing had ever stood, turning quietly over the water. The first lighthouses burned coal in open baskets, which is exactly as blunt and as beautiful as it sounds. An iron grate, called a chauffeur, sat on top of the tower with a fire in it, and a keeper fed that fire all night long. Coal had to be landed by boat, carried up the cliff and hauled to the top in baskets, hundreds of tons of it in a year. The wind was both the problem and the solution. A gale blew the fire to a fierce brightness just when ships most needed it, and then blew the embers away entirely or wrapped the whole light in its own smoke. Later came oil lamps with polished reflectors behind them, steadier, cleaner, and far easier to tend. They could also be trimmed to burn evenly all night. But for a long stretch of history, the warning was simply a bonfire on a stone tower, tended by one person in the dark, with the sound of the sea underneath. A revolving lens let a light be told apart from other lights, and that idea quietly changed navigation. A single steady glow on a coast is almost useless if there are three of them and you cannot tell which is which. So each light was given a character. One flash every 10 seconds, 2 flashes, then a pause, a slow sweep, or a fixed light that brightened and faded. A navigator with a watch could count the interval, look it up in a printed list, and know exactly which headland he had. The great Fresnel lenses made this possible, rings of moulded glass prisms bending a small flame into a beam you could see for many miles. The lens was turned by clockwork, driven by a heavy weight sinking slowly down the middle of the tower, and the keeper wound it up again through the night. Later ones floated on a bath of mercury and turned at the touch of a hand. Lightships were anchored where no tower could stand, which is a strange and rather brave answer to a difficult problem. Some hazards are sandbanks, not rocks, and you cannot build on sand that moves. So instead, they moored a ship. A stout hull, no engine worth speaking of, a lantern housed at the masthead, and an enormous chain running down to mushroom anchors buried in the bottom. The Nore, the Goodwins, the mouth of the Thames, the approaches to great river ports everywhere kept their lightships. The mooring chain alone could weigh more than the anchors themselves. Life aboard was its own quiet trade. A small crew, weeks at a time, riding out gales without ever going anywhere, tending the lamp, sounding the fog bell, and painting the name of the station in tall letters along the side, so any passing ship knew precisely where it was. A ship that never sailed, holding station in the dark, so that other ships could pass safely by. Lifeboat services grew out of single terrible nights, and the pattern repeats all around the coast. A ship strikes on a bank within sight of a town. The town watches and cannot reach her because the boats they have are not built for surf. And afterwards, somebody decides that this must never be the case again. That is roughly the story behind the early purpose-built lifeboats on the northeast coast of England, boats designed with cork buoyancy and a shape that would right itself and would not swamp. In the 1820s, a national institution was founded in Britain after a public appeal, and station by station it put boats and crews into the small harbours where they were needed. The crews were fishermen and pilots and boat builders, called out by a maroon in the middle of the night. They went out with oars first, and sails later, and engines later still. They still are, in many places. And the boathouse doors still face the water, ready. The Plimsoll line came from ships being deliberately overloaded, at least according to the campaigners who fought for it, and the argument was long and bitter. Samuel Plimsoll pressed the case in Parliament that some vessels were being sent to sea sitting far too deep, with too little freeboard left between the deck and the water. His proposed remedy was almost absurdly simple. Paint a mark on the side of every hull showing how deep she may legally be loaded, and let anybody standing on a quay see at a glance whether she is over it. It cost almost nothing to paint. That mark became the load line, a circle crossed by a horizontal bar with a small ladder of extra marks beside it, because a ship floats higher in cold salt water than in warm fresh water, and the safe depth changes with the season and the ocean. A painted circle on a hull, quietly doing its work in every harbour in the world. Overloaded ships were once insured for more than they were worth, or so the reformers argued, and that claim sat at the heart of the whole campaign. Marine insurance grew up in the coffee houses of London, where underwriters would read a description of a voyage and sign their names beneath it for a share of the risk. It was an elegant system, and like all elegant systems, it could be leaned on. The accusation was that a small number of owners had worked out that an old vessel, heavily loaded and heavily insured, was worth more to them at the bottom than afloat. How common this really was, historians still argue about. What matters is that the argument was made loudly enough to change the law, and the law then changed the ships. Surveys, load lines, certificates. Inspectors with the power to detain a ship in port until she was put right. Paper, in the end, holding a hull a little higher out of the water. Rules for who leaves a sinking ship first came from one wreck, or at least the custom is usually traced to it. In 1852, the troop ship Birkenhead struck an uncharted rock off the southern tip of Africa, in the dark, close inshore. There were very few boats. The ship had struck hard on the rock, and it was clear she would not come off it. The soldiers aboard were formed up on deck and held there in their ranks, while the women and children were put into the boats and pulled clear. That order, women and children first, became known afterwards as the Birkenhead drill, and it spread through the merchant services of the world as a matter of honor rather than law. It was never a universal rule, and it was not always followed, but it entered the language and it changed what people expected of themselves at sea. A line of men standing quietly in the dark, waiting while the boats pulled away toward the shore. An international ice patrol still watches the North Atlantic quietly every season, and most people have never heard of it. It was set up after a famous loss, and it has simply carried on ever since. Each spring, icebergs carved from the glaciers of western Greenland drift south with the Labrador Current into the shipping lanes and the patrol tracks where the ice has reached. Aircraft fly long survey legs over the open water. Ships passing through report what they see, and that goes into the picture too. Radar and satellite data are fed into drift models that predict where each berg will be tomorrow and the day after. From that, they draw a limit, a line on the chart, and broadcast it to every ship at sea. Cross north of it at your own discretion. Stay south of it, and you are clear. It is undramatic work mostly, and it means that somewhere over the grey water tonight, there is an aeroplane on a long, slow turn, counting ice. Almost every rule at sea was written after something went wrong, and if you read the rule book that way, it becomes a kind of memorial. Red to port and green to starboard, so two ships meeting at night can tell which way the other is heading. A pattern of sound signals in fog, ni one long blast too short. Watertight bulkheads dividing a hull into compartments so that flooding stays where it started. Boats for everyone aboard, and drills so the crew know their stations. A continuous radio watch so a call for help is heard the first time. Charts corrected week by week, and a sounding taken the moment the water begins to look doubtful. None of these arrived from theory. Each one is the settled answer to a specific night on a specific piece of water. And so the safest ship afloat today is carrying invisibly the memory of every vessel that came to rest before her on the quiet floor of the sea. Most wrecks have never been found and never will be, and that is not a failure of effort. Estimates of the number of wrecks worldwide vary enormously, and the figures often quoted run into the millions, which tells you mostly that nobody can really count them. The ocean is very large and very deep, and most of its floor has only been mapped coarsely by satellite measurements of the sea surface, at a resolution far too blunt to show a ship. Finding a particular wreck usually means narrowing a search box from thousands of square miles to tens, using old logs, weather records, current models, and a great deal of patience, and then towing a sonar back and forth across it for weeks. Search teams call it mowing the lawn because That is exactly what the track looks like on a screen. Sometimes it works, often it does not. And the rest lie where they came to rest, unvisited, unphotographed, keeping their own position to themselves. Sonar shows a wreck as a shadow before it shows it as a ship, which surprises people the first time they see the screen. Side-scan sonar works by sending sound out sideways from a towfish pulled behind the survey vessel, low over the bottom, and listening for the return. Hard, raised objects throw the sound back strongly and appear bright, but behind them, where the sound could not reach, there is nothing at all, and that nothing prints as a black, acoustic shadow stretching away across the seabed. The shadow is the useful part. Its length tells you how tall the object stands, its shape tells you the profile, and an experienced surveyor can read masts, a funnel, or the sheer of a hull out of a dark smear. Something lying flat on the bottom throws almost no shadow and can be missed entirely. So the first sight of a lost ship after centuries is often just a long, soft shadow lying on the sand. Cold, fresh water preserves wrecks best of all. And the reason is a small animal that simply cannot live in it. The shipworm that riddles timber in warm salt water needs salinity to survive, and in fresh water it is absent. Take the salt away, then take the temperature down, and wood loses almost everything that was working against it. What remains is slow chemistry, and slow chemistry can be very slow indeed in water that sits near freezing for much of the year. Iron fastenings corrode gently. Paint stays on planking. Rope keeps its lay. Painted lettering can still be read along a bow. Even canvas can survive, folded where it was furled. Deep lakes are the classic case, dark and cold below the thermocline, with little oxygen and almost no current stirring the bottom. Down there, a ship is not so much preserved as simply left alone, in the way a room is left alone when the door is closed and the house goes quiet. There are wrecks in the Great Lakes with masts still standing, upright and fully rigged, hundreds of feet down. Divers who go to them describe something closer to visiting than exploring. A schooner sits on an even keel with her bowsprit still out, her deckhouse in place, the wheel standing aft with the spokes intact, and coils of rope lying where somebody left them on the deck. The water is so cold and so clear that a light will reach the length of the hull. Some of these ships lie well below the depth, where any daylight reaches in permanent dark. Even now, as you rest, those masts are standing in the dark, exactly as they have stood for well over a century, with the fresh water pressing gently on the wood, and nothing at all happening in any hurry. There is no eating away, no collapse, no rush, just a ship, upright, with her rigging still describing the shape of the wind she was built to hold. A wreck becomes a reef within a few years, and the sequence is remarkably orderly. Within hours, a film of bacteria settles on every clean surface. Within weeks, the film is furred with hydroids and algae. Then come the fixed animals that need something solid to hold on to, barnacles and mussels and tube worms, then sea anemones, sponges, and in warmer water, the soft corals that turn a steel plate into something like a garden. Each layer makes better footing for the next. The rate depends on the water. Warm, bright and shallow is fastest, and cold and deep can take decades. 10 years on, the hull is no longer really visible as metal or wood. It is a raised structure covered in living things, and the outline of a deck rail or a davit shows only as a suggestion under the growth. What began as an interruption in the seabed becomes, without any ceremony at all, simply another piece of the landscape down there. Fish shelter in a hull the way they shelter in rock, and to them the distinction never existed. Most of the open seabed is flat, soft, and offers nothing to hide behind. A wreck is vertical relief. It gives shade. It gives a current shadow where a fish can hold position without swimming hard all day. And it gives 1,000 small openings where something can back in and face outward. So the shoals gather. Baitfish hang in a shimmering cloud in the lee of the superstructure, moving as one body when a shadow crosses. Larger fish patrol the edges. Crabs work the sand at the foot of the hull, where the current drops what it carries. A conger will take up residence in a length of pipe and stay for years. Divers say the fish behave as though the ship has always been there, which, for every fish now living on it, is perfectly true. A hull full of quiet traffic, turning slowly in the green light. Some wrecks are now protected as war graves, and the rules around them are deliberately simple. Where a ship was lost in service, and her people were lost with her, many nations have designated the site as a place of rest, and the law says plainly that it is not to be disturbed. Divers may visit and look, in many cases, but not enter, not recover, not touch. Some sites are closed altogether, and the position is kept quiet for that reason. Often, the position is marked only by a buoy on the surface, and once a year a small vessel goes out to it and a wreath is set on the water. It is a quiet form of respect, and an unusual one, because the memorial is the thing itself, exactly where it came to rest. No stone was carried out and set up. The ship is the stone, and the sea keeps it without needing to be asked, year after year after year. Others are left exactly where they are, on purpose, and this is now the ordinary practice rather than the exception. Marine archaeologists talk about preservation in place, and the reasoning is practical. A wreck that has reached equilibrium with the seabed, buried in silt, cold, and starved of oxygen, is already sitting in the best storage anyone could design. Lift it, and you start a clock that never stops. Waterlogged timber must be soaked for years in preserving solutions and dried under close control, or it will crack and shrink as it gives up its water. Iron begins to corrode the moment it meets air. A single medium-sized hull can take decades of laboratory work and a budget to match, so the modern instinct is to survey, record, monitor, and leave. Photograph the site in fine detail, map it, come back in 10 years and see what has changed, and otherwise let the sand keep doing, for free, what no laboratory can do as well. Every wreck is a moment that stopped and stayed stopped, and that is really what draws people down to them. A ship at sea is a small, complete, working world with everything in it arranged for use. When she settles, that arrangement stops moving. The cargo stays stowed in the order it was loaded, tier by tier, in the sequence a merchant's clerk wrote down on a key long ago. Tools stay in the chest they belong to. A bowl sits where somebody set it down. The coins in a purse stop at the last year they were struck and say so plainly. Nothing arrived afterwards to confuse it. Archaeologists sometimes call a wreck a closed find, meaning everything in it belongs to the same single day, which is something a town or a house almost never gives you. So a wreck is not really a ruin. It is an ordinary afternoon, kept exactly as it was in cold water, with nobody to hurry it along. In the cold and the dark, they are very slowly becoming the sea. Nothing down there is trying to erase them. There is no violence in any of it, and no particular hurry either. It is gentler than that and far less deliberate. Timber gives up its shape a fiber at a time. Iron turns to soft, orange forms that hold the outline of what they used to be. Sand drifts across a deck and settles into every hollow. And one winter it covers the rail, and one winter it covers everything, and the shape under the sand goes on being a ship for a long while yet. Meanwhile, the animals arrive and settle and make their homes, and the current moves through what is left, and the whole thing quietly stops being an event and becomes a place. Not lost, exactly, not found either, just resting, with the weight of the water above and the sand below on the quiet floor of the sea. And now the sea begins to go quiet behind your thoughts. We have drifted through 100 quiet truths tonight, and there is nothing left to hold on to. We stood on deck in the last hour of a long voyage, when the land was close and the water was shoaling. We read the colour of the sea for warnings and swung the lead and counted the fathoms coming up. We followed ships that sailed without knowing where they were, east and west, across charts copied from older charts, past islands that were never there. We waited in an open boat for a topsail to lift above the horizon. We watched a fire burning in an iron basket on a stone tower, and then a lens turning, and then a lightship holding station on a moving sand. We went down after them, in bells and helmets, feeling along a hull in the dark, and we found some of them, at last, as a long, soft shadow lying on the sand. The wrecks are resting now, and they do not need anything from us. The ones in the Baltic mud are still whole. The ones in the cold lakes are still standing with their masts up exactly as they were. The ones in warm water have become reefs full of small fish turning in the green light, and they are doing better as reefs than they ever did as cargo. The lights are still turning tonight, along headlands you will never see, each one with its own slow count. The lightships and the boys are still riding to their chains. Somewhere over the North Atlantic, an aeroplane is flying a long, straight leg, counting ice so that the ships below can pass in peace. And the sea itself keeps its own slow time, tide after tide, without needing anything at all from you. So let the room be as it is. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let your hands go heavy and your jaw loosen, and let your breathing slow until it is doing itself without your help. There is nothing left to work out, nothing to remember, and nothing you have to carry into tomorrow tonight. The ships are down there in the cold and the dark, unhurried, becoming the sea. The lights are turning. The water is moving the way it always moves. And you are here warm and still, with the whole of it far away and going on gently without you. Let the last of the thinking drift off the way a wisp of weed lets go of a plank and lifts away into the dark, turning slowly, settling somewhere on the quiet floor of the sea. Sleep well, and good night, and good